Come on. So today is Lay Witness Sunday, and we have the privilege of listening to Verne Miniaci. Verne is a longtime member of our church, and he has seen lots of ups and downs in his life and walked steadily with Christ. In our church, we honor lay witnesses because it's important for us all to hear many voices and many experiences of Jesus Christ in different lives. Today, Verne will share with you the way that he's walked with Christ and what he has learned and discerned along the way. As he does that, I would invite you to let your mind's eye drift back towards your own journey with Christ, and also to make the fundamental decision inside to be inspired by Verne's willingness to come and to do this thing, which is quite hard to do if you never have stood at this podium. And in your own life, we would love to see you give witness to your family and to your friends and to people that you meet along the way, as well as pray about taking advantage of the opportunity sometime to give your lay witness here at church. Verne, are you ready? No?
Good morning. We've all heard the saying, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I actually believe that it should be, that which doesn't kill you makes you smarter. How many times have you done something that resulted in an injury or a waste of materials or not what you wanted and decided, well, I won't do that again, or next time I'll do it differently? I also believe that to grow in your faith, you have to put your trust in God. These two things are what brought me closer to Him. I was baptized in 1953 in the Evangelical United Brethren Church in Sacramento, also known as the EUB, and currently the United in United Methodist. I'd gone to church regularly and was active in the youth fellowship. In 1959, I was elected president of the Northern California EUB Youth Fellowship. And that summer, I spent a month working at the EUB Mission School in Redbird, Kentucky. But in 1960, I just turned my back on Christ and the church. I went searching for my identity. For over the next 2.5 decades, I lived a life without any spiritual guidance. Now, was all that time a total loss? No, not really. Did I learn some difficult life lessons? Absolutely. Because Christ wasn't in my life, I couldn't avoid some of the lessons. If I had let Him be with me, other lessons I could have learned sooner and with fewer consequences. Just let me share some of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And like the movie, I too will start with the ugly. After a 10-year marriage, I ended it with a divorce. About 7 years later, I married again, only to have it annulled after 18 months. I had a couple of long-term relationships. Those were the ones where we lived together or shared houses, and they failed. And there are many other things that time restraints keep me from mentioning. The bad. During that time, I worked for 8 different employers in 6 different career fields. I smoked, drank more than I should have, and spent a lot of time and money on things that I thought would make me happy. It was a waste of both. The good. I have 2 beautiful daughters from my first marriage. I served in the military for 4 years. For some of you, that may not sound like a positive, but I actually enjoyed a lot of my time in the service. And I also received 4 years of the GI Bill as a bonus. With the GI Bill, I was able to complete my bachelor's degree, get a teaching credential, and a master's degree. And I eventually got a job as an art teacher. Am I sorry for the bad and the ugly that I did? Without a doubt. Have I done anything to rectify them? Yes, I have. I've asked for forgiveness from God, and whenever possible, I have asked the person or people involved to forgive me. So in my case, it only took me 28 years to get smarter. In 1988, I had a good job as an art teacher in Corcoran. I had just bought a house, and I had recently returned from 3 weeks touring Europe. Compared to what I had been doing, it sounds like I had it pretty good. By now, I had a good idea of who I was, but not what I was. I still felt incomplete. I knew something was missing. I started praying, and I went back to church. One of the first things that happened was I met Allison Schlick. She had been baptized at Visalia United Methodist, and shortly after we began dating, I had my membership transferred from Faith UMC in Sacramento to Visalia. I'd like to add a little aside here and tell you that my mother, who had been praying for me all this time, had also kept my membership active in the church, even though I hadn't attended it for over 20 years. For Allison and myself, it didn't take long before we realized that there was something special between us. Now, I'm not just talking about the physical and mental attraction, or that we were both teachers, but we were putting God in our lives too. And within a year, we were married. And then just last July, we celebrated our 29th anniversary. Allison wanted to be a mother, but I had had a vasectomy 15 years earlier. We talked about this before the marriage, and I agreed to go through the reversal operation. It was successful, and God blessed us with a daughter, Marissa. Allison and I went through a study program in the church called Trinity. One of the questions asked during the program had to do with where you were in your Christian walk. I remember telling Allison that I felt like a child in my walk. It was as if I was still 19 years old. Now, in hindsight, I realized that, yes, I was back in church, my life was better and happier, but my Christian growth hadn't changed. I hadn't been challenged to do any growing, but that would soon change. Between June 12th and July 6th of 2002, we were hit with 3 major life events. My mother died, my father died, and I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. To say we were in a state of shock would be an understatement. Excuse me. I can remember sitting in a doctor's office at Sequoia Cancer Center waiting for him to come in and explain what my treatment was going to be. And all the time sitting there, I kept saying to myself, God, this is in your hands. My treatment was to be 40 days of radiation, a significant biblical number. At the same time, the church was about to change. Now, for those of you who may not be aware, in 2002, Visalia United Methodist Church had the largest congregation of any Methodist church between Los Angeles and Sacramento. We were on the way to becoming a megachurch. In July of that year, we had a change of leadership. Pastor Harry Wood retired, and Pastor Lynn Goodyear replaced him. It wasn't too long after that that turmoil began. The person who had been leading the Saturday night services decided that he could do better on his own, and he left to start his own church, taking with him a large number of the congregation. It was also at this time that a group from the congregation that remained were meeting to figure out how to get rid of Pastor Goodyear. I happened to be serving on the Staff Parish Relationship Committee at the time. The SPRC is the committee that deals with hiring and firing of church personnel, deals with human resource things, and handles conflict between the congregation and the staff. Being on the committee meant I was aware of a lot of information that the general congregation didn't know. During that time, I received letters and calls from members of the church who suggested that this or that should be done, or else they were going to leave the church. It was not a good time. I found it very difficult to understand how Christians in the same church, who I had known for years, were so angry and upset. It's not like Pastor Goodyear was preaching anything unbiblical or had made any major policy changes. It was just that he was a change, and some people don't deal well with change. During that time, I had finished my 40 days of radiation treatments and received a clean bill of health, one concern down. When I finished my term on SPRC, Pastor Goodyear asked if I would stay for another 3 years, and I agreed. It was also at this time that he decided he had had enough and asked to be transferred. The bishop told us that there were no pastors in the conference that fit our needs, and they would have to look outside the conference. Eventually, a pastor from Colorado, Steve Creel, was found, and the SPRC was in charge of the interview. Usually, when a pastor has an interview with the SPRC, it's only a formality because the pastor is going to stay for at least a year. In this case, we were instructed by the bishop that both Pastor Steve and the SPRC had the right of refusal. The interview went very well, and at the end, he asked if he could close us in prayer. He asked that we hold hands. I got a chill in my body, and it felt like God was telling me, your church will survive. Pastor Steve took over, but the storm continued. We had to hire a number of new positions, but it seemed that finding the right fit was not going to be an easy job. Some would come, then leave. Others had to be let go. And all the while, parts of the congregation were not happy and were leaving the church. Allison and I wondered how the church would survive this tumultuous transition and retain its identity. I remember coming into the church on Sunday mornings, and it felt like a black cloud was over the entire congregation. The atmosphere was oppressive. I felt God had told me that the church would survive, but I couldn't see how. Being on the SPRC, I got to know Pastor Steve on a more personal level. We enjoyed golfing and soon became golfing buddies and good friends. I was well aware of what he was going through trying to hold the church together. Even after I got off SPRC, I knew what he was going through. The sermons I had been hearing over the past couple of years and after Pastor Steve arrived were different. I felt they were asking questions about what type of Christian I was, and it forced me to look at my life differently. Throughout my life, there had been a number of pastors who I had known on a more personal level, whom I had been able to reflect upon and learn what it meant to be a true Christian. Each of them had shown me something useful for my walk, and it was this time in my life that I needed all the help I could get. Eventually, I came to the realization that all I needed to do was to be more patient, pray more, love more, forgive more, and read Scripture. After all, God had told me the church would survive. I just needed to let Him work and accept that it would not be the same as before. It was going to be better. Eventually, things started to settle down, and we began to become a church that was a church for the community. We began to institute ministries and changes. We now have services in 2 languages. We have divorce care for kids and teens. We have Grief Share, Stephen's Ministries, Pounds of Love, which gives food to a larger number in the community, and our Drop in the Bucket program. The changes that are taking place in the church are opportunities that each of us can use to grow in our love and understanding of Christ and his teachings. For myself, I know that I'm making an effort to follow Christ's example and love my neighbor as myself. I love to teach. I derive great pleasure from being able to impart something to another person that I believe will make them look at the world differently and could possibly make their life better. Through my work as a facilitator with divorce care, I can understand what the people who attend are going through, and I also know that through the power of Jesus Christ, they can come out feeling better about themselves and be stronger to continue their life. My participation in a grace group is also helping me to change my look on life and my fellow man. In God's eyes, I'm no better or worse than anyone else. Through all that I have experienced and what I have learned from observation and Scripture has shown me that my life didn't need some dramatic, awe-inspired event to change me. I just needed to do what I had learned. And the Scripture that I feel best fits me is Proverbs 3, 5-7. Trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. So basically, I'm still the same sweet person I was at 18, only with the rough edges honed to sharper corners, and with the focus away from me and towards others. I'm working not to be as self-centered and as judgmental as I once was, but to see my neighbor as a person who may or may not have had the same advantages as myself. I won't lie, though, it's still a struggle. There are a lot of people out there who make it very difficult to be loved. And the circle of life continues with its sorrows, joys, and trials. During the past 8 years, we lost Allison's father, and just last year, her mother passed away. But also within those years, we celebrated the birth of 4 great-grandsons, and Marissa was married in October. In February of this year, I was diagnosed with a return of my prostate cancer. My reaction and state of mind were entirely different than they were in 2002. I didn't have any fear or worry. I didn't feel a need to pray at that time because I already knew that the outcome was in God's hands. But later I did tell him of what my personal feelings about what the outcome should be. After 6 months, my test results showed that the treatments were successful. During the time of my treatments, I tried to conduct myself in a manner that would be uplifting and positive to those around me who were aware of my condition. To those who were unaware, I just wanted to show that my life was blessed by God and I was enjoying every minute of it. God is in charge, and I thank him daily for it. Thank you.